So welcome to our brand new teaching series. This series is all about Jesus. Now that sounds a little bit weird because teaching series should always be about Jesus. But this series, we are going to focus in on some stories looking at who Jesus was and the things that he taught us and the things that he did. And this series is called Selfless because Jesus didn't just do selfless things. He didn't just teach us how to be selfless. Jesus in himself was selfless, and that's why millions of people around the world today and throughout history like and love Jesus, because he is selfless. And now, thousands of years later, psychologists are catching up to what Jesus taught and who he was, because psychologists are now teaching that if we live lives that are selfless, it not only improves the lives of those around us, it improves our own life. When we are selfless, it's good for our own health. It's good for our own mental health to do things that aren't just about us. And what I want to do through this series is help us to think about how we can live lives that are selfless. You know, there's a quote that says, true humility is not thinking less of yourself, it is thinking of yourself less. And what I want to encourage us, whether you're a Christian or not a Christian, I want to encourage you to live lives that are selfless. And we're going to do that by looking through different stories and moments when Jesus did things that were selfless, that had opportunities to teach into selflessness. And the first topic that we're going to look at, in fact, each week we're going to look at a different topic, and it's going to be under the heading Selfless Living Requires. And today we are kicking off, we're going in hard with selfless living requires loving people. See, Jesus told this story when he was teaching some of the Jewish leaders. He talks about the story of the Good Samaritan, which if you've been around church for more than a couple of weeks, you will have heard this story before. If you're not from church, if you're, wouldn't call yourself a Christian, then you may well still have heard this story. But basically, Jesus tells this story of a guy who gets beat up on a road, and he gets beat up and left for dead by the side of the road. And two people walk past one at a time, who are the people that are supposed to help him, people from the same background as him, people who you would expect would stop and help him. And those two different people walk past and ignore him. But then there's a guy comes back, and he was a Samaritan. Now, bear in mind, the context of this is Jesus is speaking to the Jewish leaders, so he's speaking to the Jews who absolutely hated the Samaritans. Jews and Samaritans were at war with each other. They were at odds with each other. They didn't like each other. Jews would look down their nose at Samaritans and say they were dirty, that nobody should ever go near them. Like, they would not want anything to do with a Samaritan. That for a Jew to think that a Samaritan would help somebody was mind-blowing. And what Jesus does here is he tells this story, and the Samaritan guy stops. He helps the guy out. He cares for them. He loves them. He picks them up. He puts them on the back of his horse or his donkey, and he takes them to go and get help. And he takes them and looks after him, and he says, I'll cover all the bills. I will help him out and make sure that he's absolutely fine. And this would have been mind-blowing for the Jewish leaders, because for them, what they understood loving people to be was they would love the people that they liked, that they would love the people that they got on with, that they would love the people that loved them back. But here, Jesus was teaching them a new way to love people. Jesus was teaching them that actually you love the people that you don't get on with as well. Jesus was trying to teach them to not just be selfish in the way that they love people, but selfless. And Jesus understood and was getting everybody to try and understand this one simple phrase, and it is this: every human heart needs to experience love. Every human heart needs to experience love. No matter what background you're from, no matter where you were brought up, no matter what's happened to you in your life, no matter how hard you are or how weak you are, no matter how funny you are or how boring you are, every human heart needs to experience love. And Jesus was trying to get them to understand that it's not just about loving the people that love you back, it's about loving people. And selfless living requires us to love people. And Jesus didn't just teach it, he lived it. There's this moment before Jesus is about to get arrested, and he stood in the garden and he's waiting to come and get arrested. And the people that are coming to arrest him turn up. And the disciples freak out and they're ready for a fight. And it says this in Luke 22. It says, when the other disciples saw what was about to happen, they exclaimed, Lord, should we fight? We've brought the sword. They're like, come on, boys, let's get stuck in. And one of them struck the high priest's slave, slashing off his right ear. But Jesus said, no more of this. And he touched the man's ear and healed him. How mad is that? That Jesus, in the moment that his enemies are coming to get him, when the moment that his enemies are coming to arrest him, and, Jesus could well have gone, yes, when one of his disciples cut off his ear, he's like, come on, boys, we're going to fight back, and we're going to get them, and yes, we got one of our enemies. But Jesus doesn't do that. Jesus, in this moment, goes, whoa, 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 stop. This is a human heart who needs to experience love. And yes, he's my enemy, but he's got his ear cut off. And I'm going to be selfless, and I'm going to heal his ear in this moment. You see, for us, if we are to live lives that are selfless, we need to understand that every human heart needs to experience love. That's the person that annoyed you this morning. That's the person who you haven't got on with for years in your school. That's the person that when you think of them, your blood begins to boil. We need to understand that they have a human heart, and every human heart needs to experience love. If we are going to live selflessly, then we need to be willing to love other people. A few years ago, we went to a festival called Soul Survivor. In fact, it was the last year that we went. And what used to happen in the way that we did Soul Survivor, it was around about 8,000 people in the one venue. And you had to be there on point to get the spot. And we had our spot that we went to. It was at the back of the front section. And we would get there about an hour and 15 minutes before the session started, and we'd be there by the door, we'd be poised, we'd be ready. As soon as the doors opened, we would sprint in, and we would dive on the floor, and we'd spread out, and we'd be protective of our space, and we'd be like staring at other youth groups that were trying to get our space, and we'd be like, back off, this is LifecentralYouth. And like we would be protective of our space, and we would sit there for an hour waiting for the session to start, and then we would be in prime position, in the best position that we wanted to be in, to take part in the main session. And this one morning, we got there early, we'd spread out, we'd done our thing, we'd secured our spot, and we were policing it, and we were protecting it. And about 5 minutes before the session started, this small youth group pitched in, and it was one youth leader and 4 lads. And they turned up, and they were wandering around, and they were looking for a space. And I saw what happened. They just decided that they were going to try and force their way into our space. So what happened was they stood behind us and just slowly moved forward, which meant we were slightly moving forward. And I got a little bit annoyed because we'd worked really hard to get that spot. Like, we'd got there early, we'd done the whole running in and all that kind of stuff. And they just pitched up 5 minutes before the session started and tried to steal some of our space. And I think I may have had a strong word with the youth leader. I can't remember, I was a little bit angry at the time. But I sensed within the whole of our group that was there that all of us felt like these lads were our enemies, that they were taking our space. And everybody was a little bit miffed, and I was as well. I was a little bit annoyed. But then the session started, and the band started playing, and we started to sing and all this kind of stuff. And I was getting into it, and then I looked around, and I was blown away because one of our young people had realized that these were 4 lads who had human hearts who needed to experience love. And what he did is he went along the line and he prayed for each and every one of them. And he shook their hand and welcomed them. And I thought, man, I am such a bad Christian. I am such a bad leader that I was so angry with these. And I was shown up by a 14-year-old lad who lived selflessly, who understood that selfless living required loving people. And although these lads had annoyed us by taking our space, he understood that these guys had human hearts that required love. Guys, we are kicking off this series, and we're starting with something quite difficult. But if we are going to live selflessly, it requires us to love people. We've got to be willing to not just love the people that like us back, not just love our own friends and family, but love people. Loving those people that do our heads in. Loving those people that you don't even really care about. Those people that you think it's their own fault that they're in that mess. That selfless living requires us to love people regardless. Guys, we need to see the person behind what we are feeling. And this isn't just a Christian thing. Like, if you're not a Christian, living selflessly is about loving people. and going past whatever background you're from, whatever has gone on in the past. Loving people is a part of living selflessly, whether you call yourself a Christian or not. But seeing the person behind the behavior is really, really important. Sometimes people will act up and be in a mood and be stressy with you because there's something deeper going on inside of them. We need to look at every person in the world and see that every human heart requires and needs to experience love. That's what living selflessly is about. So if we are going to live selfless lives, the first thing that we need to know is it requires us to love other people.